Since the highly controversial first draft in 2016, much has changed with the GMSF. The controversial plans, which originally sought to build on more than 8% of Greater Manchester's greenbelt. However, after attracting criticism from across the political spectrum and having negative responses from thousands of residents, the authority was forced to go back to the drawing board to rethink. Now, since being elected to this House in 2015, I've campaigned alongside residents to protect local greenbelt, particularly around the village of High Lane, from massive developments as proposed under the GMSF. I've attended public meetings, led debates in this House, submitted a petition from over 4,000 of my constituents, worked with my constituency neighbours, and lobbied 3 different housing ministers about the matter. I want to place on record my thanks to all of the local people who, with their letters, the signing of various petitions, organising demonstrations and making their voices heard, have supported this campaign so far, and I hope that they will continue to do so. One major improvement is the overall of housing targets under the framework appears to have in effect been assessed at a county-wide level rather than a purely local authority one. This means that some of the house building targets from the first draft can be redistributed across the local authority boundaries to where local housing need is perhaps higher or indeed land availability is greater. And I believe that this is a sensible approach and was a change that I and others called for in response to the first draft. I will happily give way to the Shadow Secretary of State.
He and I are both Stockport members of Parliament, and he will know that there are some in Stockport, principally the Liberal Democrats, that have talked about pulling Stockport out of the county-wide cooperation on planning. Does he not agree with me that that would be absolutely folly, because the situation that he has just described, whereby some of Stockport's housing growth can be shared across the county, would not be available to Stockport should they pull out of the GMSF?
The Shadow Secretary of State is absolutely right. It is highly irresponsible, in my opinion, and indeed in his, for any political party to make such broad statements that will actually increase the pressures on local greenbelt by some 5,000 potentially for the borough of Stockport. And so he is completely right to place that on the record this afternoon. The fact is we need more housing, but this should be implemented following a vigorous brownfield first policy, insisting that brownfield land, which has had development on it previously, should be prioritised for the building of homes. This would encourage regeneration of our towns and make best use of our land, and also will be located, quite importantly, where there is already the necessary infrastructure and where local services can be augmented and improved. So we know that Greater Manchester has at least 1,000 hectares of brownfield land spread across 439 sites, which have not yet been fully developed for housing, enough to build at least 55,000 homes, and it's indeed likely that more such land can be found. There must be stronger consideration at the individual site level for what is being lost in terms of green space or green belt, particularly with regards to wildlife corridors and recreational spaces. One such local site in particular of particular concern to me is the area at Highbank Meadows in Romilly in my constituency. It contains well-used community facilities of Tankshut fields, including playing fields, 3 football pitches, a children's play area, and is adjacent to the Tankshut Meadow, which is a popular local green space, a nature reserve, a community orchard, and allotments. Now, such a loss of this green space would be damaging to the local environment, the community, and the health and well-being of local people. That is just but one example from the entire GMSF second draft document. Now, particularly in respect of roads, traffic and local amenities, though obviously less than the previous 4,000 proposed, even a relatively small site, 250 homes, will mean at least 250 extra cars on the road, and probably more 2 or indeed 3 cars per household. While I welcome the significant reduction to the amount of greenbelt land released in Stockport, the policy of brownfield first, the inclusion of appropriate infrastructure and further local public consultation remain top priorities for the Greater Manchester Spatial Framework.